All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. You are here to witness a procurement spotlight on getting more local and values-aligned food in the DoD Fresh program. My name is Cassandra Bull, and I'm a policy specialist with the National Farm to School Network. And this webinar is co-facilitated by Cornell Cooperative Extension Harvest New York, us, and Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems. So this is actually part of a larger 2-year state spotlight webinar series, which is part of an even bigger national procurement farm to school community of practice for state agencies and state level TA providers. This is the public portion of that. And our goals for this series are to increase awareness of innovative programs and people doing really incredible work. We overarching want to tease out all of the multiple levers that state level actors can use to advance local procurement in schools. There's so many different ways, and today we're focusing on DoD Fresh. And so we're going to focus on emerging and unique strategies for these levers. We are not going to focus on legislation, and often we're going to try to talk about how to integrate local into existing programs and existing systems. So case in point, DoD Fresh, which, as you'll hear, every year is around $500 million that are allocated to this program through entitlement. And if we can shift just a portion of those funds for local agriculture, that will really make a difference. And then we are also going to focus on no and low cost strategies to move the needle on local procurement. And then our last goal of the series is to share high level insight on replication and implementation so that folks can walk away with an understanding on how to replicate that in their own communities. So speaking today, I am just your facilitator, but my colleague Cheryl Belinsky from Cornell University will be giving an intro about the DoD Fresh program. Then we're going to pass it to a prime vendor for DoD, What Chefs Want. And Anna Haas and Maddie Chera from their local food connection program will be speaking about what they've been up to. And then lastly, we're going to turn it over to Nora Stewart from Friends of the Earth, who's going to talk about the perspective of making change from an outsider, getting more values-aligned food into DoD Fresh. And an additional shout out to May Tsupros from Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems, Lizzie Cooper, and S.J. Peterson, who are also from Cornell University. So our agenda, after those 3 different sort of buckets of presentations, we're going to open it up to a Q&A. And we're doing something a little different today. So Lizzie is going to be sharing a link to a Canva whiteboard, and you'll see 2 different pages where you can enter in your questions for the speakers, and we're going to see how they sort of visually align and make space between the presentations for you to fill out your questions. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Cheryl.
Great. Thank you, Cassandra. Hello, all. So my job is to give you a quick introduction to DoD Fresh, otherwise known as the Department of Defense Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, not to be confused with the program that we featured during our first spotlight, which is also called the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. These are different. We're going to level set in the next few slides and again, give you a high level overview of a fairly complicated program. Next slide, please. So how does DoD Fresh work? First, SFAs, or school food authorities, are authorized to allocate a portion of their USDA entitlement dollars to fresh produce, and that's done through the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Order Receipt System, otherwise known as FAVORS. DoD Fresh is a partnership between the USDA, the DoD Defense Logistics Agency, otherwise known as DLA, which we will be referencing throughout this presentation, and state distributing agencies. And those state distributing agencies vary by state. So I'm from New York, and ours in New York is called Office of General Services. They do procurement, but also it can often be the Department of Ag and Markets or Education. So it's important to know who that is in your state if you don't already. This program is available to schools in 49 states, DC, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, and Guam. Importantly, the USDA, doesn't impose a cap on the amount of entitlement that can be directed towards DoD, and we're actually going to see how that's changed over the last few years, and allocations to DoD can be changed throughout the school year. And DoD can be used to support a suite of child nutrition programs, including National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, summer feeding programs like SSO and SFSP. Next slide, please. So this bar chart here looks at the portion of entitlement funds directed towards DoD over a series of years. Unfortunately, the data is a little bit dated. So the most recent data we have is from the 2020-2021 school year. I have requested updated data and we'll be happy to share that when we have it. But there's a couple key takeaways here. First of all, as Cassandra mentioned in her earlier remarks, nearly $500 million is spent on DoD Fresh, right? And that was in the last year we have on record, which is 2020 to 2021. And the DoD portion of entitlement is growing annually. So if you look at the chart going back to 2014, 2015, DoD was only 10% of the USDA entitlement allocation. Fast forward to 2020, 2021, we see that at 37%. So we're curious as a facilitation team to see if that trend has continued over the last few years. And like I said, if we get updated information, we'll be sure to share it with all of you. But it's not an insignificant amount of money, which is why we're so excited to be here today. And there's so much interest in this conversation. Next slide, please. So how does it work? And again, this is meant to be a high-level overview. But DLA awards prime vendors in each state through a competitive process. And there tends to be about 1 to 3 vendors per state, though that's not a hard and fast rule to the best of my knowledge. Some have 1, some have 3. Contracts last on average 3.5 to 5 years. And prime vendors have a lot of choice in what produce they purchase and from whom they purchase it through. They are also able to subcontract with other distributors and often do to help with last mile delivery across states. Produce does have to be GAP certified, so that is a requirement of the program, and or adhere to GHP, good handling practices, and also be US grade #1. The contracts utilize a fixed price structure with an economic price adjustment. Next slide, please. So how does local show up in these? First and foremost, prime vendors are required to submit a local purchasing plan to DLA, but there is no formal requirement to purchase local as it currently exists. In that local purchasing plan, the prime vendor needs to include a list of products that they currently purchase from local sources, a list of growers that they source from, and their plans to expand the purchase of local. So there does seem to be a focus on supporting local through this, which is exciting. To identify locals, school food authorities or SFAs are encouraged to check favors. That's that ordering system again. They can look at source of origin data. So prime vendors must list the state that the produce comes from, and they can list up to 3. And they also list if it's locally grown, and locally grown as defined through DoD Fresh means it's from the SFA's state, right? So I live in New York, that would be from New York or adjacent to, basically touching the state. To request more local options, SFAs should contact their prime vendor, their state distribution agency, and let them know that they would like to see more local, and or their DLA representative. And we're going to share contact information for all of those at the end here and should have gone out in your resources ahead of time. Producers that are interested in selling to DoD are also encouraged to contract DLA contracted prime vendors, let them know that you have local products. Again, they are required to submit that local purchasing plan. Next slide, please. So how can you find state-specific information? So first of all, you're going to want to find out who your state's prime vendors are, and you can search the DLA contract repository that's linked there. You can search by state, you can keyword search produce. There's a number of ways that you can do it, but you can see who has the contracts for your state currently, and you can actually open up those contracts and look at a lot of information, some of which is redacted, but there's a rich amount of data in those contracts. And then something that we've done in New York, and I encourage you to all do if you're curious what specific items your SFAs are purchasing, is you can actually FOIA the data through USDA Food and Nutrition Services. I've done it annually for the last 8 years, and I'm able to drill down to a very granular level. The FOIA that I have submitted will tell me exactly what items are purchased. by what SFA and actually drills down further to what building within the SFA that ordered it. You can find out the source of supply, whether it's domestic or locally grown, again, adhering to that locally grown definition that DoD Fresh uses. You can find out the state of origin. You can get very detailed pricing information. So this is something that we've shared with our produce and farm partners across the state, specifically what items are coming through DoD, what prices are being paid for those, and it gives you an idea of where and how you can be competitive. So I encourage you to do that if you haven't and you like data and you're interested in knowing. Next slide, please. So these are just a few additional resources, and these are all hyperlinked, and I believe all of these were sent, most of these were sent out by Cassandra in advance, but you can find out who your DLA representative is in each state, and I encourage you to reach out to them. I actually reached out to them last Friday with a few questions, and they got back to me right away, so very responsive. There's Apex accelerators. I have never used those before, but I did reach out to one and got an immediate response. And their job is to help businesses navigate government contracts. And they confirm they do help support this particular contract. They're free to use. Businesses need to request their service, and they're in every state. So it's something I encourage you to look into and or share with your distribution partners if they're trying to get a contract through DoD Fresh. You can also check in with your state distribution agency. Again, that's going to vary by state. And if you want to get notified of contract opportunities through DoD Fresh, you're going to want to sign up at sam.gov and you can receive information on contract opportunities. And you can also request information to a system called DIBS, which is the DLA Internet Bid Board System. You have to do a few more things to be able to get notifications through that, including setting up a cage code and inputting, some company details first. But that's the end of our high level overview, and I hope it gave you enough of a level set to inform the rest of this rich dialogue. So thank you, and I will pass it back to you, Cassandra.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm seeing, let's see, there's some people that are getting grayed out pop-ups, partially blocking slides. If this
I,
is, yeah,
I think if you hide all your Zoom controls, if that's possible, Cassandra, I think
okay.
it's just the Zoom boxes, but I
Ah,
don't know if that's possible.
I'll try my best. I'm so sorry if some folks are getting grayed out. I feel like this hasn't happened. I'll try my best to, oh, hide floating meeting controls. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Cheryl. That was an awesome overview, and you did it in record time for a complicated program. So now I'm really honored to invite Anna and Maddie to share about what it's like to be a DoD Fresh vendor, and how they've been incorporating local.
Great. Thanks, Cassandra. I'll start us off. I'm Maddie. And Anna and I both have many years of experience working in local food systems before joining the local food program. And actually, Anna started the local food program at What Chefs Want. And I think that combined with the origins of our local food program and of our company as a whole in smaller food hubs that bought from small and medium-sized farms, aggregated food, and got it out to customers really helps shape what our company does with local food. What Chefs Want is a wholesale distributor. And kind of as I was saying, that that focus and background in local that we bring and that the origins of the company bring really helps to bring in that local agriculture and food systems focus that we might associate with, small farms, value-based, purchasing, community commitments, a lot of, really deep relationships, and merge that with all of the assets and the reach that what a more traditional food distribution system might have, including, transportation, storage, logistics, marketing, rigorous requirements for quality control and food safety, and also the ability to have convenient offerings for customers with a one-stop shop for all sorts of different products, including local. So that's sort of where we sit, and that shapes kind of our place at this table. And if you go to the next slide, Cassandra. We are based in Louisville, Kentucky. Anna and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, but our company is in 12 plus states now in 4 major regions, including Colorado, the Central region, and the Southeast, including Florida. And we've been serving schools in all of those regions for many years. We've been doing DoD Fresh for many years. But we've really only been able to expand local in a big way over the last few years, and we're going to talk about some of the ways we've done that. We are the DoD Fresh Prime Vendor for 4 states, so Colorado, Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois, and each of them is in a very different position. And so that's also going to inform what we share with you today and hopefully help illustrate some of the differences and different approaches that you might take also. So I'm going to go to the next slide and pass it over to Anna.
Thanks, Maddie, and thanks for that great introduction to DoD Fresh at the beginning, Cheryl, as well. So as Maddie said, I am the local food program director for What Chefs Want. I lead the local food program, and as Maddie has explained, it's important to understand that we are a distributor, but we lead this local food program that has been based around a food hub model, having started a food hub with another co-founder, myself, that is now part of this. So we are a unicorn in some ways. I don't know that you'll find many, if any, other DoD Fresh vendors like us, and we're going to acknowledge that throughout this presentation. We're not saying that it's going to be easy to do exactly what we did, but we are hoping to give you a few keys to the kingdom for your state and to tell you a little bit from the inside as two people who understand both worlds in a kind of unique way. So I can tell you, we have, as a team, over a decade of buying from local farms. I actually took on the role as a commodity purchaser for a while at the distribution company. I bought and sold all of the mushrooms and the milk for the company for a while, and that taught me how to be a traditional commodity purchaser in addition to a local foods purchaser. But as that local foods purchaser, I have the skills and the history to be able to communicate, crop plan, make commitments to farms like a food hub does, and like we have as an independent food hub in the past too. We've kept that. We do use DoD Fresh as a really important anchor program, particularly in our Colorado and our Kentucky and Indiana programs. We serve restaurants, we serve healthcare, we serve universities, we serve retailers, and what's been wonderful is that we're able to see this DoD Fresh program as a way to choose some produce commodities and bring in and have the movement to be able to offer them to some of our other customers too. So it has been a very important program within our program as well. We do, I hope you'll see, have a commitment to education on both sides. So we are here trying to educate you all. We're educating SFAs as well and our partners in each state, as well as educating the farmers about farm to distribution. And we see our one of our missions is having transparent traceability going both ways. So the farmers that are involved know that they're participating in this program, know what products are going and to whom, and in addition to, of course, the schools knowing that as well. Okay, next slide, please. So here are the 4 states. I want to highlight each of these just very quickly, and you'll see that they're very different. So if you skip down to that third one, Illinois, you'll actually see that we're here today to tell you that in terms of what we've reported on and tracked as local, that we know is local, we're showing you 0 cases and $0. And that's because Illinois is one of these states that we're going to call, in our own terminology, a patchwork state. So Cheryl mentioned that it is very possible and often happens for a DoD prime vendor to subcontract with other distributors to help cover a state. Illinois is one of those states in which we don't have trucks covering the whole state. And so historically, we've used 3 other distributors to cover different parts of the state. That means that if we were to try to offer local or any item on DoD Fresh in favors, it has to be done the same way by 4 distributors in that state. And honestly, we just have not touched it yet. We do have some programs and some applications out there to help us really focus on that and hope to see that happen. In Colorado, on the opposite end of the spectrum, that was our highest amount of sales and our highest number of cases in this past year. And it's a program in which our company there has really done it in a certain way for a number of years, even before they became part of What Chefs Want through an acquisition. And so they have listed Colorado apples, Colorado peaches, Colorado sweet corn, Colorado carrots, and other major produce commodities in that state, but they've listed them as kind of normal items. And so that's why you'll see that they're larger cases, regular size cases, they tend to be on the more expensive side. What we'll talk a little bit more about that we've really innovated on and that I've been able to do myself, they've given me some keys to the kingdom in Kentucky and Indiana, is that we've been able to really work with smaller and mid-sized farms and to do some extra offerings of local that tend to be in smaller pack sizes. And so you'll see that difference in the average amount per case. We didn't do as much as in Colorado, but you'll see that the cases are relatively high as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. Okay, and we'll be speeding up a little bit more as we get into the future slides on this. Next slide, please. So Kentucky is my favorite program to talk about. We actually had a press release go out from the Department of Agriculture there for Farm to School Month this past school year. And we really focused hard in both Kentucky and Indiana on trying to get as many items on DoD Fresh for schools in Farm to School Month of October 2025. I'll let you read these items yourself. I won't read them to you, but I will tell you that for green bell peppers, usually a 1 1/9 bushel is the commodity pack size. We listed domestic green bell peppers at the same time through the regular purchasers, but I worked with the school team to offer 5-pound local green bell peppers as well. And so schools could really choose between those. We marked the local ones as local. We marked the other ones coming from that state. And what was really neat there is that we're able to follow the traditional thing that happens within distribution and produce, which is that we pay a higher cost per pound for a smaller pack size. So that's one way that we were able to help those smaller and medium-sized farms. As you can see, we had 15 vendors participating in just that month. That was our highest month. And as a food hub, we've been able to do is to work with everyone from organic vendors to conventional vendors. We worked with hydroponic as well as field grown. We worked with some BIPOC farms. We worked with the plain community as well. So we worked really hard to try to get a large swath and to show that this could be done. Next slide, please. So now, how do you do it? What do you do? How can we make change in other states as well? So I never expected to work for a distributor before, having come from a food hub background in food systems. I don't think that Maddie did either. But what we can do is tell you a little bit about what it is like to be a distributor. Maybe there's a few distributors here. And so if you are an advocate and working in a state to try to talk about doing more local with your DoD Prime vendor, you may want to know what motivates them. I would say that one of the highest motivators for a distributor is that they want to grow their sales. Clearly, that's what most food businesses want to do. But the way that you grow your sales in DoD Fresh is that you have more, you have more allocations in the next year. So more SFAs might choose to participate if they find out that there's local. They may choose to put more money into the program if they find out that it's local. And there's not really any way for a distributor to grow DoD sales other than to have these happy customers who are putting more in. So you might want to talk to your DoD Prime vendor about that. You may meet some resistance. It took me 4 years of kind of tapping away at this and innovating and trying different things to really get everyone on board. We do have a 98% fulfillment rate, and some of these products have over 1,000 cases a week sold. And so this is not a program to tinker with. This is not something that someone can cancel on. You can't have your vendors cancel on it. You cannot have you can't really cancel on the schools and keep the contract. And we only find out our final orders, at least in our programs, about 5 days ahead of time. So we have fewer than 5 days to get that product in and out the door to those schools. This is the hardest thing that I've done in food systems, I'll be honest. And your distributors may be nervous about that as well. The other thing to consider is that they may be wary about allocating extra warehouse space for a second code. So that's one of the reasons that we did, for instance, the 5-pound green peppers in addition to the regular green peppers, is that it was easier to kind of pick those apart in the warehouse. And our company was willing to give them some warehouse space. So I believe now is the time I pass it back to Maddie, and we're going to start talking about tactics in your states.
Yes, thanks, Anna. So all credit to Anna. She helped come up with this typology to kind of help us, everyone in the room, sort of think through what are some of the strategies that we've experienced or tried out that might be relevant in different parts of the country, and kind of assess and evaluate where the states you're in stand and kind of where you fit. So I have two questions I want each of you to ask yourselves, and if you don't know the answer now, look into it after the call. But the first is the prime vendor, is the distributor for DoD Fresh, delivering across the whole state? So for us in Illinois, we are not delivering across the whole state. So we would say no. And in that case, we're in a patchwork status. So we kind of have to piece together different tactics and might expect to move a little more slowly in implementing local through DoD Fresh. If the answer is yes, then the second question you should ask is the prime vendor excited about local? And luckily, in some of the states where we're working, like Indiana and Kentucky, that's the case. And so we would be run ready and able to kind of hit the ground running and progress pretty quickly. If the answer is no, that's okay. There's still things we're going to talk about that you can do, but there might be a little bit more slow buildup. You might need to do a little bit more nudging and building, partners to get that to happen. So think about these as we go through the next few tactics. There's going to be on each of the subsequent slides sort of a red light, green light based on these different statuses. And that'll give you a hint of like which things you should prioritize based on your state's situation. So we'll go to the next slide and start with tactic 1, which is relevant for everyone, I think. And that is report on what's happening with local so far in DoD in your state. So we heard from Cheryl that there's some different ways to get information. I know we share information with partners too about the states we distribute. And Anna kind of talked a little bit about the different bins and the different local versus non-local. A lot of distributors will actually fill the non-local commodity, what we call produce commodity bins, with local produce when that produce is in season locally. So a lot of times, for example, in Kentucky during the summer, cucumbers from Kentucky are cheaper than cucumbers from somewhere else. So even when it's not marked as local, it will be coming from a local source. That's just one example of where there could actually be a lot more local going out through DoD than you might originally recognize. And so getting that data and building a baseline so that you can encourage even more local is a really great place to start. And so we can go to the next tactic, which is communicate. Again, everyone can do this. So once you have some of that data and you are seeing some movement on local or just, anything that's a positive sign, give kudos, talk about that impact, praise the farms, the schools, the distributors that are involved in local and kind of encourage them to do more. And so that can be really helpful in all senses. The other thing to do is to make sure if you are offering all local items that it's marked as local on favors and share that info so that schools know that that's available to order. And then we've also found that it's helpful to spotlight even more information about the farms and the locations where they are on our website so that we can communicate and build trust with the schools about the local sourcing. I'll pass it on to you, Anna, for the next slide.
Great. Next slide. Thank you. So I have learned in my work at the distributor that if I try one thing first, it usually works better than trying to do a lot of things at once. So what I would say is that if you are an advocate working with or talking to the DoD Prime Vendor, or if you are a DoD Prime Vendor yourself, start with one item. Choose something that is in that beautiful Venn diagram that is right in the middle, and it's what a school actually wants to buy. So it's great for DoD Fresh, that it's one of your major products that your state produces, and or a neighboring state, of course, since that's considered local too for DoD Fresh, and what's available unprocessed to begin with too, because that's a lot easier. Start thinking about what is market priced. Maddie named Cucumbers is an example in Kentucky. Green bell peppers is a great one in the Midwestern states as well, where it's just a normal green bell pepper, even though it's local. And your distributor can even use codes that already exist as long as they're looking back and doing reporting to you of where it came from and where it went to. And a lot of them, really all of them, should be able to do that after the fact. Find success before you try another one, and again, find that sweet spot. Next one, please. Tactic 4 is really what we ended up doing, and it has taken me 4 years to try to do. So if your DoD Prime vendor gets really good at this, if you all work together, you may want to try to bring on more small and medium-sized farms. I talked a lot about pack size and the higher cost per pound that enables. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you what a lot of these look like. So one of the things that we did is, because we are the DoD Prime vendor and your DoD Prime vendor can do the same thing, we can look and see what all the options are for pack sizes for kale, for instance, for apples. There was actually a local code within DoD Fresh for apples. And so we just started with what DoD said we could do, what DLA said that we could do, and chose 10-pound sweet potatoes instead of a huge bag of 50-pound sweet potatoes. And so schools may, for some of these commodities like yellow squash, like zucchini, they don't use a lot of them anyway. And so it was a great thing to try and to just get a little bit of movement on and try out. As you can see, this is one of those communication pieces that we send out where we're really trying to show you the primary producers, show our SFAs the primary producer on each of those. This is a communication that went out in November. Next slide for Maddie, please.
And wrapping up, our final tactic we'd suggest, and this is one that would definitely be the best fit once you've already had success trying some of the other tactics, so best fit for run-ready states, is to build on partnerships to grow that local and DoD Fresh and really expand. So one way that sticks out is working with partners to train school food service staff. So we all know there's a lot of turnover in that field, and there's a lot of opportunities that already exist to train and communicate with food service. So this picture on the left is me at one of the Kentucky Department of Agriculture trainings last year, where we just talked about what is DoD Fresh, what's available local to you, what are the allocation deadlines, what happens if you don't use the allocation. All those basics can be really helpful. We meet with state partners every month, and we also are working on newsletters, things like that, to improve communication. I mentioned telling the impact. We're often speaking about this in different venues, including today's. And we're also working with folks like all of you and NFSN to advocate for more support. And I think this is a great segue, hopefully, to our friends at Friends of the Earth. So I'll pass it back to you, Cassandra, to intro.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Maddie and Anna, that was a ton of great information, and I'm sure folks in the room have questions and thoughts and general kudos for you. So I believe we're sharing in the chat the Canva whiteboard link. This is just a screenshot, but we're going to spend probably like 2 or 3 minutes just self-populating, and I'll share that screen to see what you all are thinking of before we turn it over to Nora. So let's see. Yes, I see some of you in there. I'm glad this is working. And we are not going to respond to these right now, but I just wanted to share this so we can get our thoughts out before we're hit with another dose of amazing innovation from Friends of the Earth. All right, I'm going to, seeing lots of questions, please feel free to keep filling those out. Lots of questions on how food hubs can become prime vendors, which Cheryl knew we would get. And hopefully those can be addressed during the Q&A. All right, so Nora, Maddie teed you up really well. Do you want to share about what it's been like working from the outside in?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cassandra. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see all of you. I see so many familiar names on the call, and it's just wonderful to have us here together to talk about this strategy of adding more local, organic, and values-aligned produce to DoD Fresh. If you can go to the next slide. So I am Nora. I work with Friends of the Earth on our climate-friendly school food program. We work with over 100 school districts in California on adding more climate-friendly, plant-based, and organic offerings to school menus. We do that through menu development support, student engagement and marketing support, as well as connecting with others on peer-to-peer learning cohorts and bringing people together to share best strategies and connect with each other. We are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to build a food system that is healthy, sustainable, and just. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so, I mentioned the term climate-friendly food. What does that mean? Friends of the Earth, we have kind of a four-pronged definition, really focused on more plant-based and plant-forward menu offerings that have lower carbon and water footprints, focusing on local, regional, and diversified sourcing, working with local farmers and food hubs, reducing food waste, as well as climate-friendly production practices, which is really reducing pesticides through organic farming practices that protects farm workers, student health, and the environment. So today we're going to talk and kind of focus in on that last prong around climate-friendly production practices, but these are all kind of four pieces that we focus on. And really kind of the goal is, better student health and better planetary health as well. Next slide. Okay, and I see my colleague Leah Smith is dropping some links in the chat, so thank you, Leah, for doing that. So I'm going to just dive right into a story about our work in California. I mentioned that we are working with over 100 school districts in California, and one of the things that we were noticing back in 2020 was this real interest of looking at what are the systems and processes that school districts use their commodity dollars, and how can we add more organic purchasing to meet school districts where they're at. So we ended up talking with our department, California Department of Education, to connect us with the prime vendors in California that work with the DoD Fresh program. And there are two prime vendors in California. We have a Northern California prime vendor and a Southern California prime vendor. And we met with them to really ask, can we add more organic fruits and vegetables to your catalog? And one of the things that we did, and I'm going to go through this in just a moment, is really demonstrate demand, and that there are a lot of school districts in the state of California who are really interested in adding more organic produce. And we identified, I think, 5 to 10 different produce items that was seasonally grown. I think Anna and Maddie did a great job kind of looking at that chart of like what's seasonal, what can be served in schools, and what's, available for school districts to purchase. And so we approached them and said, can you add, let's start with a few items. Can you add some more organic offerings to your menu, to your favors list? And if you go to the next slide, have just had absolutely tremendous success with the program. And I have to credit the prime vendors in California. We are so grateful. In Northern California, we work with Pro Pacific. And in Southern California, it's Valley Produce, and it was formerly Coast Citrus. To really add, since 2020, we have grown from no organic offerings to over $6 million purchased, with over 466 school districts that have purchased organic on the menu, which leads to 1.4 million pounds of organic produce. And this is just organic produce that's offered. And again, I talked about we started off small with only a few different organic items. Now today we're working with about 36 different organic products that are available throughout the year depending on seasonality. And we're just really excited about this, especially in terms of, again, that better health for students with reduction in pesticides, better planetary health as well, and then also supporting the farm workers and our natural ecosystem. So we're just really excited to see that, and it really ultimately strengthens our food system. So next slide. And this is kind of our theory of change. It kind of demonstrates through that story how local action can really lead to sharing stories, movement building, coming together, which ultimately can affect systems level impact. Next slide. And so I'm going to go into a little bit of the how piece of how we were able to sort of demonstrate that demand, and just give a few different examples that we've done. We have been working with these prime vendors for the past 6 years now. And so we continue to engage and work with the prime vendor and partner with them to see how we can continue to increase organic offerings on the favors catalog. And one of the ways that we do this is to identify what is in season and what are school districts interested in purchasing. So and then also what's local to California. So California, we are grateful that we can grow a lot of different things in California. So we started with a list of, what is grown locally in California, what is available that DoD Fresh Prime vendors could potentially utilize. And this is a separate project, but I think it demonstrates a pretty good example of like, we have all these different things: basils, beans, beets. And then the grayed out boxes here on this chart are when they are not typically grown in season. So you can see here, like, basil is not typically grown in December, that there's a grayed out box. So we're able to kind of map out what's available in season. And then the green, yellow, and red demonstrates how interested school districts are in purchasing. And you can see, like, districts aren't very interested in eggplant, right? But there's a lot of districts that are interested in cherry tomatoes. So we're able to kind of map onto this chart. And if you go to the next slide, and then kind of narrow down, okay, here are the top produce that we are seeing that school districts are really wanting. This is on the left-hand side, to source from DoD Fresh that they could use. And here's kind of when they're grown. So we were able to kind of present something like this to DoD Fresh. The other thing that Friends of the Earth we look at is the Dirty Dozen list. And if you don't know kind of where to start, if you feel sort of overwhelmed by there's so many different produce items, start with the top list of fruits and vegetables that typically have the most amount of pesticides, and see, can we start with maybe spinach? And spinach is grown locally, and can we get that through the DoD Fresh list as organic? So that's another place to start. And we cross-referenced our list with the Dirty Dozen list as a way to start. Next slide. The other piece that we did was we surveyed school districts. We actually did this in a lot of different ways, again, to kind of meet school districts where they're at. I mentioned that we do like peer-to-peer learning calls. We've also done webinars where we just did a quick like Zoom poll. We've sent out like different surveys. So we'll engage school districts in different touch points to really understand what districts are most interested in for the DoD Fresh catalog and what they're interested in terms of organic or local. Next slide. Okay, and then we debated how busy this slide looks. I apologize if it's like, whoa, what's going on here? But one of the other things that we did is, throughout the 6 years, is put together a letter writing campaign. And once you've identified maybe like 5 fruits and vegetables that you really want to add, that for organic items, we put together as a nonprofit like a template letter that school districts could use to send to the prime vendor to say, hey, like our district is really committed and interested in adding more organic offerings. And so if anyone's interested in this letter, we can send you a template. If you go to the next slide, here's like the final what it all looks like once it's beautiful and finished. And it really just demonstrates to the prime vendor, hey, okay, these are the districts that are really committed to purchasing organic if it is added to the list. Next slide. So just some key takeaways from this presentation today. I think one of the things that we've learned as Friends of the Earth is really the power of nonprofit organizations to really kind of mobilize support from school districts. And school districts are usually very busy, as we know. And so to be able to aggregate support, and those of you who maybe host coalitions or collaboratives, to really be able to bring together people and identify what is the demand and what is it that we're really looking for in terms of sourcing. school districts, I think you all have the power to communicate that demand. I mean, ultimately, you all are the customer. So being able to communicate the demand, and then when you see that there is local or there is organic listed in the favors catalog, to be able to purchase it, promote it in your district community, but then also to thank the prime vendor and say, hey, I noticed that you had organic strawberries. I was really excited about that. I'm very committed to purchasing organic strawberries. We are really grateful to the California Department of Education for connecting us with the prime vendors initially, and then ultimately the prime vendors for their support on really adding more local organic offerings to their list. Next slide. Okay, so what can you do? I think Leah is going to drop. We have a brand new website about DoD Fresh and just kind of outlines this. There's a great podcast and some really good resources here on this webpage. The other piece is we have this, one of the things that Friends of the Earth is really committed to is supporting other states in getting more local organic produce onto the DoD Fresh favors list. So we want to see this happen beyond California. We want to see organic on other DoD Fresh catalogs. And so if you are interested for your state, I would love for you to fill out the interest form. I'm happy to meet with you, and we can strategize together how to approach the prime vendor in your state and get more organic local offerings on your favorites catalog. So Leah dropped that in the chat, and I am always available. Please feel welcome to email me. I think that's it, Cassandra. We were not going to share the video today, I don't think, which we knew for the sake of time.
Okay. No, that's okay. I'm getting to the whiteboard section.
Great.
All the grayed out boxes and tech snafu for not, but I think we'll definitely share that in post. And also, thank you so much for your presentation, Nora. That was amazing. That was a perfect fold into all the different kinds of people that are on this call and how they can engage. I do want to spend a few moments, if we can turn to the second page of that Canva whiteboard and fill out any questions we have for Nora. Okay, let's see. Great, we're getting some questions for Nora. Awesome. Thanks everyone for trying this out with us. I think it's working out great. My final question for each of the three folks before we turn it over to the general Q&A is, what advice do you have for state agencies or any sort of TA providers to try to replicate this in their communities? One takeaway. Nora, we'll start with you.
I was reading all the amazing questions and completely missed. I apologize. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what's your one takeaway for state agencies or TA providers to replicate this in their areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing, and this was asked in the chat earlier at the beginning of the call, is there demand for local and organic? And I would say the answer is yes. We're seeing more and more school districts really being committed to more values aligned purchasing, and we can really do that through the DoD Fresh program. And so being able to add a few different items that are organic and local can really help support these purchasing goals that school districts have. And so encouraging prime vendors to really consider that, and then state agencies to also encourage that movement as well.
Thank you, Nora. Maddie, what's your final takeaway?
complicated. I think that we gave, 5 good tactics to explore. But I love seeing the questions and all that's left to explore together. I think partnership and communication are key. We've shown that there can be some local that you don't even know about. And so getting that information out there and building from there is really a great place to start.
That's great. Thank you, Maddie. And Anna, your final takeaway?
I would encourage everyone to encourage the SFAs to use their voice and speak to the DoD Prime Vendor. So they want the business. Each distributor, each Prime Vendor wants the business in that state, and they want to hear from the schools how important it is. I think that our schools team has often been surprised that we don't hear from our customers on this program more often, and have often come away with new understandings when we do. And so specifically the school food authorities, the food service directors, anyone who is making those decisions of where to allocate their money should be talking to that prime vendor, whether it's through DLA or whether it's direct.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Okay, we have some moments for questions, and I think I will ask some. Well, I'll turn it over to you, Anna. Again, how do food hubs apply to be a DoD Prime vendor? I know I asked you that the first time we met.
I don't know the answer to that question specifically. I do know that there is an application and a bid process that is really difficult for any vendor to go through. I'll be real honest, and I told Cassandra this as well. I think food hubs can do anything. I wonder whether food hubs can do this because it requires doing so many products that are not local additionally. So if you are the DoD Prime vendor, you need to be able to provide domestic product throughout the year whenever it is domestic and not just local. You also have to be able to travel throughout the state or through a broad swath of the state and or subcontract with other distributors. It's just a very, very big task. And so I don't want to doubt. I would love to see that happen, but I think one would really have to understand the bidding process, the requirements, and all that it takes to do so. And that honestly is why we've come from the standpoint of how to work with the people who already have the contract. Maybe that's not what everybody wants to hear, but it's at least a start.
Great. Thank you. Monica, I see your hand, but I'm going to turn it over to a question for Nora, and then we'll turn it to you. Let's see. Nora, which of these questions would you like to respond to?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I can do both.
Great.
I'm open to both. So what accounted for the big jump? That's a really good question. I think that in that year, between 2023, 2024, we saw the prime vendors adding more options. So instead of just adding like 2 or 3 different organic produce options, they added like 6 to 8 produce options. So by adding just more offerings, we just naturally saw more orders. So I think that's what accounted, which is great. We love to see that. And then for SFAs ordering on favors, what are ways they can communicate their requests? Or thanks to the prime vendors? That's a really good question. It probably varies state by state. So in terms of and curious if anyone else, maybe from the USDA who's here on the call, could help answer that. But we have been able to identify like who the prime vendors are, and usually they have an email address that you can just email and set up a communication. And Anna and Maddie, I wonder if you all like what the best way is for you. And I think the other thing is if you don't know what the best thing to do is, you could try reaching out directly to the prime vendor and then secondary, reach out to your state agency and ask that way as well. But
Great.
Melanie and Anna, I don't know if you want to add anything else there.
I think that's perfect. Every distributor is going to be used to hearing from their customers and wanting to make sure that their customers' points of view get to the right people. And so, we have a school's email address. We have ways to contact from our website, and there's a whole department that any of those requests go to. So even if you're just going to you figure out who that DoD Prime vendor is and just going to their website and using the contact us feature, I believe it will get to the right person.
Great. Thank you. Monica, I'm going to call on you. Did you have a question? You raised your hand.
No, actually, I just wanted to clarify because I work with USDA Foods and the DoD contract, and I just wanted to add that for many of these contracts, at least here in New England, just to remember that schools are not the only customers on these. DoD is Department of Defense, so they're also delivering to multiple military installations. So that can also be part of what complicates being a customer. So just as a reminder to that. So you have to keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. And thanks for being here. Okay, I have another question, which is, even though orders are confirmed just 5 days ahead, do the SFAs offer projections or planning ahead of time? And what are those conversations like? I'll let Maddie or Anna take that one. And that sort of feeds into also Esther's question of how do small and medium farmers know and commit in advance? So sort of that like idea of advanced projections. Can you speak to that?
Maddie, do you want me to take this one? In terms of the SFAs offering projections and plannings ahead of time, I believe I have heard that customers have the chance in many states to fill out a survey early in the cycle, which means maybe around April or so, to say what they think that they're going to be buying. We've actually never seen that, those answers. So it turns out that it's a pretty complicated process to find out those projections and planning. There's not really, we've talked about trying to do some kind of polling or at least talk to the larger customers, but there's not really, there's not a way of doing it that I know of or that we've used. There might be other states in which it does happen. And then how do small and medium-sized vendors know and commit in advance instead of having a last-minute order? We mentioned that this is an anchor program, so we're bringing those products into stock. And so we are buying a little bit on spec and expectation of what's going to be purchased. It also helps very much so as a purchaser to have that excess movement from the other customers so that you can guess, I think I'm going to sell 20 boxes of this a week. I'm going to send you a purchase order. I may not be seeing all of my DoD orders yet, but I think this is what's going to happen. And you know what? If it goes down a little bit, I've got a university who's also buying. I've got restaurants who are also buying. So I've learned to do that by being a purchaser and being a commodity purchaser for a bit of time as well. I hope that made sense and doesn't get too much into the weeds.
Absolutely. I think, you make many other kinds of sales outside of this system is a great response to that. We are almost at time. There are many questions that are still here. I would recommend to all of you, if you have questions, please add them here, and I will ask our gracious speakers to try to fill them out with me after the fact to the best of their ability. We'll send it out in post with the recording, which hopefully doesn't have those gray boxes. I'm not sure. I'm sorry again, but I learned a lot about tech, as always. And I'd love it if we could just give our speakers here a hand, a virtual hand or an on-camera hand. You all did such a great job. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your innovation all across the country. So excited to hear about this, and hopefully we can all take back lessons to our states. And for those in the procurement community practice, we'll see you next week for a closed meeting deep dive with these great folks on the call. Thank you all again and enjoy your afternoon.